World number one, Jannik Sinner, has been banned for 3 months for doping.
Question marks surrounding his reputation.
I am pretty sure that there are a lot of things we don't know.
His case was cleared.
Did you ever think we'd be having a conversation like this about Jannik Sinner? We're talking about the world number one, a player most people connect with discipline, focus, and doing things the right way. So the moment his name entered this conversation, it carried real weight across the tennis world. Inside the sport, reactions like this don't happen randomly. When experienced voices start saying things like, "This feels like a parody of justice," it's not something said lightly. It usually comes from people who've seen enough to know when a situation doesn't follow the usual path. What's surprising is how easy it was to miss if you weren't paying close attention. Normally, doping cases take over everything. Matches fade into the background, schedules slow down, conversations change. That didn't really happen here. Instead, things kept moving, and that's exactly what made people pause. Sinner has never been the type fans look at with suspicion. He's calm, professional, focused. So when his name came up, the reaction wasn't about guilt, it was about process. People weren't asking what happened, they were asking how it was handled. That's where the real discussion begins. Tennis has always been clear about one thing. Rules are rules. Same standards, same procedures, no exceptions. So when something feels smoother than expected, especially to players and analysts who remember how unforgiving past cases have been, it stands out. This isn't about jumping to conclusions, it's about understanding why this situation feels different. To make sense of that, you have to look at where Sinner is right now in his career. He's well past the stage of proving he belongs. He's winning the matches he should win. He's going deep in big tournaments. He's firmly established as someone expected to be there at the end of events. Timing matters in situations like this. Early in a career, things get brushed aside more easily. Much later, everything turns into legacy talk. Sinner is right in that middle space where momentum is everything, where each season feels like it's building towards something bigger. And none of this happened during a slow period. The tour kept going. Matches continued, expectations didn't change. From the outside, everything looked normal. Training, travel, competition, all business as usual. But once something like this exists, even quietly, it adds a layer you don't see on a scoreboard. That's why people inside tennis are paying close attention to how it's handled. Not because they're looking for drama, but because situations like this tend to linger. They shape trust. They shape how future cases are viewed. With that context in place, the next question becomes obvious. What actually happened? On the surface, the process itself wasn't unusual. Sinner went through a standard anti-doping test, something players deal with constantly. Most tests never turn into anything worth discussing. Here, the process moved internally. Information was reviewed, decisions were made, all while Sinner continued playing. There wasn't a moment where he disappeared from the tour. There wasn't a stretch where people were waiting for an update before matches could continue. From the outside, it looked normal enough that most fans didn't even realize there was something going on. By the time people connected the dots, it was already over. That's what made the reaction feel different. In other cases, you feel the weight immediately. Interviews change, matches feel tense, everyone waits for answers. That atmosphere never really showed up here. Once that became clear, comparisons started happening. People remembered other cases that unfolded very differently. Situations that dragged on, players sidelined early, careers stalled while everything slowed down. So when something doesn't follow that familiar pattern, it raises questions. Quiet ones, thoughtful ones, not accusations, comparisons. That's when this stops being about one player and turns into a wider conversation about how tennis handles these moments. Tennis has always been strict. Players are responsible for what enters their body. That standard has never been flexible. A lot of people remember other cases where things moved very differently. Sometimes players were pulled out right away. Other times, everything dragged on for months and it felt like it was impossible to talk about anything else. Those experiences stick with you, so when something doesn't follow that pattern, it naturally raises eyebrows. Not in an angry way, more in a, "this doesn't quite line up with what we're used to" way. Jannik Sinner stated that he followed the same procedures as others when he failed the doping test. Sinner himself has said he followed the same procedures as everyone else when the test failed. And once that's out there, comparisons start happening almost on their own, not because anyone is looking to accuse someone, but because tennis has a long memory. That's when the focus begins to shift. What starts as one situation slowly turns into a bigger discussion about how these cases are handled overall. And depending on who you listen to, you'll hear two very different reactions. Some people look at it and say, this is exactly how the system should work. If there was no intent and no real advantage gained, then context matters. The rules are there to protect fairness, not to punish players over technical details. For many fans, that explanation makes sense. Others see it differently. Among players and longtime figures around the tour, the conversation leans more toward precedent. Anti-doping rules in tennis have always been strict by design. Players are responsible for what enters their body, no exceptions. That's the standard they've lived with their entire careers. From that point of view, when someone uses a phrase like parody of justice, it isn't meant as an accusation. It's more about how light the outcome feels compared to how these situations have been handled before. Once that idea settles in, older cases naturally come back into focus. People remember players who served bans even when circumstances weren't clear, careers that lost momentum while investigations stretched on, situations where there was little room to explain or clarify anything. Those memories don't fade easily. That's where discomfort starts to creep in. When outcomes seem to change from case to case, it leads to quiet questions about consistency, about timing, about whether the same standards always apply. Most people inside tennis understand there isn't an easy answer. What's left instead is tension. Not sharp or confrontational, just present. And that tension isn't aimed at one player. It isn't personal. It's about how the system feels when you've watched it work in different ways over the years. Once something like this exists, even quietly it spreads. Players notice, coaches notice. Conversations happen, usually casually without emotion. Just people comparing experiences and moving on. Publicly, there isn't much noise, and that's normal. Nobody wants to turn it into a headline, but behind the scenes, it comes up. In locker rooms, during practice, in conversations that never leave the tour. For players who've been around longer, it's hard not to remember moments that felt heavier, slower, more disruptive. Even without frustration, those memories sit in the background. Out on the court, nothing changes. You still have to play. You still have to earn every point. There's no shortcut through competition. Mentally, though, it adds weight. Tennis already demands a lot. Injuries, form swings, rankings, decisions beyond a player's control. When something feels slightly out of rhythm, it adds to that mental noise. From the tour's side, these moments don't end with a decision. They carry forward. The next time something similar happens, people remember this one, even if it's never said out loud. Meanwhile, the season keeps rolling. Matches get played, results come in. This story doesn't dominate attention, but it doesn't disappear either. Over time, focus returns to tennis itself. Sinner keeps playing. He wins some matches, loses others. That's what most fans will judge him on, because that's how the sport works. What lasts longer is how situations like this are handled. Tennis runs on trust. Most of the time, nobody questions it. Moments like this don't break that trust, they just make people pause. And then the sport moves on.